Hello and welcome to the Dinosaw Week 28. So another 7 curious, interesting and innovative things. Let's crack on. So first of all, we've got the India Chinese app ban. So this is 59 Chinese apps have been banned by the Indian government. Now why is a little bit open to your guess as well, but according to the Indian government this is to maintain the privacy and the sovereignty of India. But there are far more complicated things going on under the scenes. For instance, you know, if this is purely financial, it probably isn't, because the Indian market makes up something like 0.08% of the revenue for these Chinese apps, so it's not huge. But I think it's more probably a little shot across the bows, really, of a big country like China, essentially moving tech into India. And using the audience of India, really. So it's quite interesting we're seeing this kind of geo-fencing statement, really. That's kind of what it is. But I think there'll be more on this. This won't be the first thing. It's a little bit like sort of South Korea and North Korea. I don't think this will be the last we see of this one, so watch that space. This is a little bit tricky to describe, but I'm going to go for it anyway. So this is DFINITY. Now, what DFINITY are, what it's trying to do is create a platform for the new internet, so the Web 3.0. So current internet is maybe not what we quite thought it would be. So privacy issues, trust issues, fake news, etc. So and this is almost coming from the monopoly that certain companies have. So Facebook, Google, for instance, Microsoft to an extent. So what DFINITY have done is they've sort of defined a new protocol, which is what they call the Internet Computer Protocol. Rather than the Internet Protocol, it's the Internet Computer Protocol. So just to explain what that means is, so Internet Protocol is really, it's the protocol for talking from service to computer, essentially your computer, your phone to a server in the sky, and that's how the internet connects, which is what the IP address is. So it's your Internet Protocol. What the Internet Computer Protocol does, it says instead of having servers on somebody else's data warehouse, Google's, Facebook's, whatever, where they've got all their data, all the code is running on their servers. What the Internet Computer does is it creates this notion of having a computer in the cloud where you as a developer, you run your code on all of the distributed cloud computers. So you don't own a server, you don't own the software, or you own the software, but you don't actually have it running on your local machines. So it's kind of more of about distributing not only the data, but also the actual applications themselves into the cloud. So great, so this distributes it, stops all the power happening. You basically, as a developer, you then pay a network of cloud providers to run your app, and that's basically how it runs. You know, there are pros and cons to this. One of the cons is that, well, if you needed to get something taken down or you didn't agree with something, like, where is it? Who owns it? If it's running on 50 servers around the world instantaneously, it gets complicated. So essentially it's quite interesting. So the reason why this has appeared this week is because they've just launched, they've got these demo apps. So DFINITY is really a company that is also trying to build this infrastructure. And what they've done is they've created 2 apps so far, one called Linked Up rather than LinkedIn, another one called CanCan, which is essentially a TikTok clone. Now the reason they've done these is because the software layer to all of this is actually on top of some more software. You don't actually have to write all the code to get your thing working. Apparently the TikTok or the CanCan app was written with less than 1,000 lines of code, rather than something like the 70 million or something, whatever it is for Facebook. So it's kind of interesting. Again, it's more of a watch this space. There's more to this to come. Tim Berners-Lee is all over this as well. You know, we are very much in this phase of what is the Web 3.0. Talking about LinkedIn again, LinkedIn have had a really curious little feature. So if you notice it just next to David's name here, there's a little kind of microphone, or a little speaker symbol. So what they've done is they've added this this helper. So if people want to try and pronounce your name, then they can just click on that and it will pronounce your name. So you go into your edits in your LinkedIn app. It's only available on the app at the moment, not the desktop. It's not appeared on mine, so I've just refreshed it. So it must be in America or something like that. It'll probably be coming here soon. However, you go into your settings, you go into your profile, you go into your name, and then next to it you can then record how your name is said. So that's kind of interesting. Now, I can't imagine for a minute that people will use it for that, or mostly use it for that. So it gives you 10 seconds of audio right on your homepage, essentially. So of course people are going to start to use that for really creative means. So I'm going to leave it there because I've got a million ways I'd use this. There's a load of stuff you can do it, elevator pitches and all sorts of stuff. So watch for that when it happens, and watch for a very quick sort of rise in people using that in curious and probably devious ways. This is quite an interesting set of tweets, and I think there's also a page behind this as well from Twitter. So this is from Twitter developers. So if you are a Twitter developer and you use their API, or if you're a developer, quite frankly, then you'll probably use certain terms over the years. So when something is on a list of things that are allowed, they're on a white list. If they're on a list of things that are disallowed and you check against them, it's a black list. You have a master-slave relationship in certain things. Some things are grandfathered, as it's called. And so there's lots of, man hours, all these sort of phrases. So what they've done is they've come out very publicly and called out all of these sort of non-inclusive terms within the industry that have just sort of grown up around it. As far as they're concerned, it's time to call them out, and it's time to sort of make a public stand. So this isn't new. This is there's quite a few people have been doing this. Maybe sort of 3 or 4 years. This is starting to become a snowball. Really, it's sort of taking off. But so there's quite a lot of chat on Twitter about most of it was sort of more like, oh really, but absolutely good for Twitter. They're sticking to the guns. Somebody did point out that obviously the word Twitter does have the word twit in it, which I thought was interesting as well, seeing as dummy values, for instance, is a non-inclusive term. So it's kind of interesting to see where that goes. This is not going to turn around. This is the direction we're going in. So it's quite interesting. If you are a developer and you are using these terms right now, then you might want to have a look at that and just see how you can make your world more inclusive as well. BMW, this sounds like on the face of it, quite a simple thing. So they're using a new thing called a digital key service, and it's been sort of growing for a few years. So now they've done a partnership, or they're using Apple technology to allow you to essentially unlock your car with your phone. So this is not particularly new. However, what was interesting was in the press release, or in the statement when they were actually presenting this, was the notion that you now have, for instance, a sort of a features as a service methodology with your car. So for instance, you could say, do I want AirPlay on my car? Famously, about 3 years ago, I think they tried to put Apple Play as a paid option on BMWs, and everybody hated it. So you had to essentially do a subscription to get your entertainment to work in your BMW, and they very quickly dropped that because nobody liked it. So they're coming back almost with a vengeance. So the interesting thing is like, can you lock new features or unlock new features of your car? And if so, things like heated seats, do they just put them in every car and it's up to you to buy them on subscription so they can carry on getting money from those features of your car? So very much sort of features as a service. So that's interesting. Tesla are sort of doing this already. They can make your car go faster or further by doing a software update. So interesting how BMW have taken it one step further, and they're almost as features as a service. Now you can buy a car. Some of them will be permanent services. So for instance, you might buy heated windows or whatever it is, and those are permanent because they're a safety feature. Other things might drop on and off, and therefore they can remove them from your car as well. So certainly in the second-hand market in several years' time, there might be sort of this kind of downgrading and upgrading of your car before you take it in to be sold. So it's quite interesting. Not quite sure where this was going, but worth a look. Leeds, of all places, has smart bins, so you can see some pictures of the smart bins at the top. Now that in itself is not that interesting. I mean, they are interesting as much as they compact the rubbish in them. So I think you can get 10 times more rubbish in these smart bins, which is great, but they also they are connected so that they will let the refuse disposal people know when they need to be emptied, and therefore if they don't need to be emptied, you don't send somebody else. So it's saving time and all that sort of stuff. Now there was Thomas Forth, it was on Twitter, noticed his tweet, so I sort of followed the journey basically. All the data is sort of open, so you can actually see just through the bin usage when the coronavirus outbreak started and you can kind of see the gradual use of bins again. So there is a dotted line between use of bins and commercial activity in the city centre of Leeds. He also had a look at the locations of the bins, which you can see in the top right corner, and as you can see, before COVID, the bins, were that full, and after COVID, you can see they're much smaller. However, there are some places where the bins were fuller, and so it's quite interesting where you can actually start to use a bizarre data source like smart bins to plot the economic recovery from COVID or from the recovery from lockdown. So really, it's like, yeah, it's a great connection, but also, where should you be looking for your data that you probably aren't currently looking for. So this is another kind of interesting one. So there's quite a few of these this week. This is an article that's worth reading from Wired about search and search kind of accuracy, I guess. So lots of companies who have anything to do with search or local fact checking, so Google, Facebook, etc., they hire third-party companies to check the local search is sort of colloquially relevant. So I'll explain what that really means. So something like, the example they give in the article is Chinese fortune cookies. So if you're in America, you probably think Chinese fortune cookies are Chinese, and they weren't. They were created in California. If you're Chinese, you absolutely know they're an American invention. So there's this kind of, there are different responses to the search of where do Chinese fortune cookies come from, depending on where you are. So what they do is they hire lots of people in local areas, and these are sort of gig economy people, so these are not full-time jobs. You take on 500 facts and you basically point them to the right facts, and you sort of make sure they're true. So the problem is, the theory should be that if you go to somewhere like Algeria and you get Algerians to fact check searches to make sure they're coming up with the right solutions, that is all fine because they are local. The only problem is if you're in Algeria, for instance, then you'll be getting paid less than probably if you're in France or the UK. So what the people in Algeria are doing is they're faking their location so they can seem like they're in the UK. They then get the UK data sent to them, and they don't really know because they're probably not native to the UK, and therefore the data going in is less good, should we say. It's the garbage in, garbage out technology. So it's quite interesting. If you didn't know about that, that's what's going on. So it's basically people trying to game the system of search data and just try and get more money. So that is obviously flowing all the way down to you and I, because certain searches are now not quite right. So that's what's causing that underneath. So it's a whole world that nobody really knew about that has really just been uncovered. So definitely have a go and look at that. And then finally, and I thoroughly approve of this one, so this is Yamamoto in Japan. Has become the first city to ban walking and using a mobile phone at the same time. So as you come out of the station, there are these posters you can see on the screen and tannoy messages that basically say, if you're going to use your mobile phone, you either need to be standing still or in a building. But if you are caught walking around with your mobile phone, then it's more seen as sort of a social thing. There's no fine for this. You're not going to get sort of pulled up by a policeman or anything like that, or a police person. This is just, it's public safety and honour for your fellow citizens. So it's quite interesting about, and there are lots of interviews with young people and old people, both saying, look, I don't think this is a bad thing. Why not? So, let's see if this spreads. There have been little, foot lanes in certain cities where you're supposed to walk if you're on your phone, and if you're not on your phone, for instance. However, that's quite an interesting development. Really like that. So, without further ado, we have reached the end. So, thank you very much, and I will see you next week.